Thank you very much for taking the time to join us again today on the February Housing Hive session, second one of the year. Another really popular topic today in terms of number of registrations. We've hit a lot of people interested in coming to this one based on the topic. I think based on the fact that it is a specific area of interest and I suppose concern in many ways as well across the sector at the minute. So yeah, we've got guest speakers to help us navigate through the item of digital exclusion and sort of driving digital inclusion in various facets today. But yeah, we'll hold off for a minute or so, and then we'll make a start. We'll do some introductions, cover the context, a little bit of background on us, and then introduce our panelists and get cracking. Here's Scott. Morning, everybody. Hiya. Okay, perfect. So I think that's all of our very welcomed guest speakers and panelists joined us now. So we'll get cracking. But yeah, just wanted to start with very brief welcome and introduction, I suppose. We will be covering the topic of breaking down barriers to digital exclusion and looking to drive digital inclusion as well today. As I said at the very beginning, it's a topic which we always try and base these Housing Hive webinars each month on discussions of topics which we're hearing quite a lot about in the sector at any one time. And it feels like, from our perspective, encouraging digital engagement, but also unlocking access for people in the social housing space is something which we're talking about quite a lot at the minute when we're considering digital transformation and sort of driving housing associations forward from an engagement point of view, but also crucially customer satisfaction too. So yeah, we'll cover that off in a second, introduce you to the three guest speakers we have joined with us, and then have a bit of an open discussion. So no presentation today, more of a conversational type approach. But we are recording as we always do, so this will be posted on our YouTube later on. So if anyone does have any queries or questions, I'd encourage you to make use of the chat pane, and then we'll leave some time at the end to sort of hopefully field those with our guest speakers. But just to begin with, very quick intro to myself and Prodo. My name's Jacob. I've worked with Prodo, who is a digital transformation agency specialising in the housing sector for over 25 years. I haven't worked with them for 25 years. I've been here for 7 years, but the agency's been doing this for over 20 years. As a digital solutions provider, we have a range of self-service products, apps and portals, do a lot of web work, but also sort of digital roadmap planning and things with our clients. I think where we see digital engagement with customers is effectively in three quite high level brackets of customers, and I'll come on to sort of how this feeds in today's topic in a second. But we typically find you'll have your digital natives, so the people who have a preference of digital solutions. They have a smartphone, they use digital multiple times a day for many different aspects of their lives. And if they find out that you have an app or a portal or some means of engaging with them digitally, they'll download it, they'll start using it, and that'll become their preference rather than calling or in-person sessions for certain things. And then we'll have your digital adopters. So I suppose one level down from that, I would say these people have access to digital, they have access to the internet, they have devices, they'll use digital for certain things, but still have reservations in some ways, maybe due to confidence or skills or a little concerns potentially of parting with data and things online, but can use it. And then, you have group three, your sort of digitally excluded people, which we're very much here to talk about today. So this group either don't have access to digital for affordability reasons, potentially. It could be disability reasons. It could be the lack of skills or confidence to use it effectively. And these are the types of people which we're kind of talking about encouraging today effectively. So when it comes to engaging customers digitally, our message at Prodo as the solutions provider is usually that, we'll give you the software, we'll give you the platforms and the means of engaging those digital natives and certain remits of the digital adopters as well. So almost as if they kind of look after themselves for certain parts of managing their tenancies, which in turn, ideally would hopefully free up the capacity and give you the resources from a housing sector point of view to have the time and have the sort of the headspace and bandwidth to deal with digital exclusion. But there's certainly more we can do on this topic from a digital inclusion point of view, specifically in that third group. So I suppose where today came from is we wanted to bring together some people that are more so experts in this area, and there is a sort of a varied approach here in terms of outlook from our guest speakers today. And yeah, as I say, as we've had such a high number of registrations, it's clearly a very sort of critical topic in the housing space that people are very much interested in looking to solve. And I think for very good reason as well. You know, in the housing space, you guys are being measured more than ever on customer satisfaction. There's a clear and obvious evolution of compliance and regulation associated with this. And when we consider digital inclusion, I'll be thinking about the Equality Act. I'm thinking about the consumer regulations, specifically the transparency, accountability, and influence standards within there as well. And then on the platforms themselves, you know, the WCAG, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines too. But I suppose just to, I guess, support that view, Digital Unite, which Emma Weston, who's joined us today, is the CEO of, have aggregated a lot of data around this particular topic from various sources, which is really useful. And I encourage you to go and look at that if you haven't already. So just to call some of those out, in that this kind of feeds into the importance of this topic. 32% of us have low or very low digital skills, which is 16.8 million people across the country. 1.6 million across the country are actually offline specifically. More than half of us don't have the full set of essential digital skills for work. And 30% of us, which is around 16 million people, don't have the full set of skills to stay safe online either. Now, I think for everyone on the call here today, me included, our panelists and everyone sort of in attendance, with the roles that you're working in at the moment, the fact you're on a Teams call, on a webinar, using your device and using your internet connection, using broadband, I would have thought that it's probably quite difficult for the likes of you or I to sort of imagine in reality being what it's like day to day, sort of falling into those statistics of not having the skills to sort of utilize digital in the ways that so many of us do, which I think hopefully we're something we're going to cover today with our three panelists. So yeah, well, I suppose that bit of background and context completed, I guess, just to sort of frame the session today. Thought now would be a great time, guys, for you to introduce yourselves, if that's okay. If we could start with yourself, Emma.
Hi, everyone, and thanks very much for that. I'm Emma, and I am the CEO of Digital Unite. I've been working in digital inclusion, exclusion my whole professional life, so that's 30 years now, which is kind of is significant, I think, because not from a personal point of view particularly, but because this has been an issue for a long, long time. So from really, I think, the birth or the take-up of the World Wide Web in this country is really when I started Digital Unite, because I was concerned that people didn't really understand what a website was. And honestly, I thought I was maybe doing something that could last for 5 years. And 30 years later, I'm still here, which means that it is something that has tracked, it's tracked digital in a way that, as you suggest, a lot of people are fairly staggered by. So you've already covered some of those stats, but for me, the fact that it's 2025 and we have 16.8 million people with low or very low digital skills is kind of mind-boggling. And it's not just about you can't watch YouTube or TikTok. It's like you can't actually function day to day without digital skills anymore. Or that's a slightly polarizing statement, but if you don't have digital access and skills, and if you're not digitally included, your life is just going to be harder, more complicated, more difficult. You are also going to be paying more money for your services. You're going to be losing out on opportunities at work. You're going to be disadvantaged in quite a myriad of complex ways. So I've been working in digital inclusion for that long simply because we still have a huge amount of people who aren't fully supported to make the most of digital. And there we are. Is that okay as an intro? I think we might go into the granularity of stuff a bit later.
Yeah. No, absolutely spot on. Thank you for that, Emma. Thanks for taking time to join us today as well. I really appreciate it. Over to yourself, Scott, if that's okay.
Everyone, it's Scott Tandy here. Excited to be here. I work for Newydd Housing Association. I'm a digital inclusion officer. That basically means I do everything I can to try and get our tenants access to devices and help them to confidently and safely use them. So we do a range of projects and initiatives that will fall within that. As everyone knows, digital is almost everything now. Hopefully I can bring in some examples from the questions that's brought in on how we set them up, and if we had to do it again, how we would go about it.
Perfect, great stuff. Thanks, Scott. Thanks for joining us as well. And yourself, Christian. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning all. I'm Christian Page. I'm the Business Inclusion and Engagement Business Partner at Newport City Homes. Fairly new to the role, less than 6 months of actual involvement in that. More for the digital side of it. I've been part of the engagement and the customer service industry predominantly most of my career. Notwithstanding the fact of recognising the need for the digital and seeing how things have developed in the digital world. So very keen to see what happens in this webinar and share any experiences or best practice that I have with people as well.
Great stuff. Thank you for the introductions, guys. I suppose just to start with, we've got a number of questions, but as I say, if anyone does have any specific that you want us to cover, feel free to pop those into the chat area. But I suppose just to begin with, we talk a hell of a lot in the housing sector, don't we, around the fact that digital transformation is kind of here to stay, and that's evolving day by day, it feels, with the growth of AI and sort of how that's progressing through at the moment, and that digital is certainly a way of one of the ways of creating the capacity that the housing sector really needs to sort of help work with customers and improve the satisfaction in many ways and become more efficient in certain scenarios. But it does kind of rely upon people having the access and ability and availability of making use of it from a customer's point of view, but also internal skills. So Emma, from your point of view, I know you provide a slightly different viewpoint on this compared with Scott and Christian being from respective sort of housing associations. But could you build on the introduction a little bit around the sort of the state of digital exclusion in the UK at the moment for us?
Yeah, I guess it's very timely, this webinar, because yesterday the government actually published its Digital Inclusion Action Plan. So we haven't had a digital inclusion strategy in the UK for kind of 14 years, which was a bit of a hole. And so when there was a change of government, there was quite a lot of hopefulness around that getting back on a map, really. And it was only published yesterday, and I read it at speed, and I need to read it much more slowly. But I would say it's a very encouraging sign from the government that they are taking this issue really seriously across all the domains of government. So their action plan is going to put together a cross-government group, which includes representatives from Housing, Health, Treasury, Department of Education, all the big departments who have a vested interest in digital inclusion, because it's a complex underpinning agenda. If you are not digitally included, it doesn't just mean, as I said earlier, you can't play games. It means also you can't book online appointments with your GP. You can't get your benefits online. You can't do any number of everyday things. So the fact that this government has actually recognised that and put that into this action plan, I feel very encouraged by. What I'm saying is a very good time to perk up your ears about digital inclusion and think about your plans, about how you're going to actually wrap that into customer support for your tenants, and also how you're going to wrap that into workforce development and skills for your staff and any volunteer groups you might work with. My belief at DU, and the thing we do at DU very specifically, is we supply training and support to people who then cascade that training and support to people who are digitally excluded. So I'm a really big believer in cascade models or trainer models. And I don't think it is possible to support 16.8 million people with digital inclusion unless we do use these models, because the numbers are too big. And the other very important point about that is it's the only way to sustain support. There's a lot of data around if you are less confident around digital, what your learning preferences are and how you'd like to be supported by people to go on that journey. And almost exclusively, people want to be supported by people they already know and trust in a way that suits them, that involves in-person support. And 25% of people who are new to digital, if they don't continue to get some sort of hand holding, will drop off again quite quickly. So this all points to the fact that if we don't build models to sustain that sort of inclusive behaviour and knowledge as a permanent state of how we manage our tenants and customers and service users, how we actually go about our jobs on a day-to-day basis as colleagues and peers, nothing is going to move sufficiently. So that's my position at DU. I support people like Scott and Christian and other housing providers to take that training and learning into their organisations so that they can pass it back out to their tenants. And that's the model we've worked on at Digital Unite for all these years, really.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense, really. Certainly when we had our catch up quite recently, when we were discussing this topic between ourselves, and you mentioned that fact of trust. And I think when we've run workshops ourselves with tenant groups and we're talking about implementing digital solutions and supporting them in various ways, trust is always one of the words that comes to the fore quite quickly in terms of building trust with customers in various ways to enable them to do these sorts of things. And I think the best way to build that trust is with people that they're familiar with and they've maybe worked with for other sort of means. And that trainer based approach, it has to be the route forward, isn't it? Certainly when you sort of consider the scale of the issue, over 60 million people that need this sort of level of support and improving that. But
I'd also say, sorry to cut in, I'd also say that the other thing that people don't always take into account is that model is again one that sort of accrues compound benefit, because it's not just that the end service user or tenant is supported. 98% of the champions that use our training resources say they have improved their own digital skills as well. So you're kind of, and that's back to my point about sustainability, you're creating models where people can keep passing it on and supporting each other. And the gentlemen in this call, they're the people doing this work, right? I'm just the person trying to help resource people from the middle, as it were. But I would say that makes the model stuff quite compelling, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Just kind of on that approach and on that topic, Scott, I know you've been in this sort of type of role for quite a long time at Newydd. Could you talk to us a little bit about specifically your experience and if that kind of feeds into kind of what Emma's talking about there on the train the trainer race? Because I know you tried a few different routes and some more successful than others.
Yeah, we've got like a test to fail model in Newydd, so it's all about trying. So I'll try and focus my answer around access and support, because obviously they're key components to digital exclusion.
Yeah.
And so in regards to access, we do things like tablet borrow schemes and not just tablets, laptops, smart speakers, the list goes on really. And that can only be done going back to collaboration with everyone, because the hardware costs, the SIM card costs, the mobile device management costs, all these things build up, and it requires a lot of expertise to have that knowledge to run that project smoothly. So through collaboration, you're able to feed in your niche, obviously reduce the costs because it could be divided by how many. You're not the only person in that local authority area. You're not the only person in that place that is probably running some sort of digital provision in that area. So how can you feed in and work together, complement each other's skills, and provide like a unified front? In regards to support, again, things like digital Fridays, digital drop-in sessions work best. And we originally set it up years and years back on our own. And I would go to one library on a Monday, the next library on Wednesday. It would just be all my week. And then what we've done, we work with Digital Unite, Digital Communities, where all these other people who offer the trainer model. We had digital champions to come in. Therefore, I said, look, I will take over Monday. Someone else can do Tuesday. Someone else can do Wednesday. As that grew, digital champions and partners would say, look, we can do a session Tuesday and Thursday now, because this model builds and builds and builds. Because again, it goes back to, you are not the only one working on this problem.
On that topic, because I think I completely agree with what you said, and it sounds like it's very positive in terms of you being able to put on more sessions, or having to put on more of those sessions because of the sort of the growth of it. What I sometimes hear in the housing sector when we talk about tenant engagement for different purposes, whether that be feeding into some sort of giving opinion or thoughts or ideas on some sort of service delivery based change, or if it is encouraging people to get involved with some sort of digital Friday session or digital Monday, whatever that might be. How have you found, or what techniques have you used to encourage customers to attend these sorts of things? Is it because these people sort of resonate with the need that you're putting forward, or have you had to sort of encourage them in other ways? Because sometimes that's a bit of a blocker from what I hear.
Yeah, definitely. So location is key. That's why we try and link in with the local authorities, the library service. You need to take the support to them. So if people needed to get a device or support by coming to our head office, they probably would never come. Now, the local library is predominantly in a good place in your town. So it's easy to get to, good transport links, so on. And it's a familiar setting. So you don't go in going on with your head down kind of thing. It's a familiar place. And there then, the person is able to open up and be more honest. They haven't got, they're not restricted. They're not up their back against the wall to get the support they need. And what we find is they're more open to sharing what they actually want to learn, not what we want them to learn. And then when you find that niche, it's about trying to focus all your effort on that specific problem for them to resolve that, which will build their confidence into other areas.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because you're right. It does all kind of feed into a wider conversation at that point, then, doesn't it? Rather than just the sort of the material that you think people are interested in, it almost becomes very personal to them and what that specific need is at that time, then, which is only going to result in better engagement and a result, I would have thought. But Christian, from your point of view, I know you're a little bit newer into this specific role of digital inclusion. How have you found working in this area as a more of a sort of a fresher set of eyes? I know that Newport City have been working in this area for a long time themselves, but maybe slightly newer for yourself.
Yeah, we've got a kind of a well-established digital inclusion team based on the need. It was one person, and then it grew to 3, and we're now up to 4. So it's not a massive team, but it's catering to the demand. Just to build on what two colleagues Emma and Scott have said there, it's very much about how do you build that trust? How do you get people to let you in? Who wants to sit down in a room with a stranger and say, I don't know how to do this, that, or the other? Yeah. Not many of us, as you know, in the industries that we're in, as confident as we are in our roles, it's still that kind of, it's not great to have to do. So trying to put people, make them feel more comfortable, get them in the environment that they're comfortable with, help them with the things that matter to them. So currently, one of our biggest successes was working with our over 55 schemes. And loaded up their mobile phones with their club cards and their Nectar cards and their Superdrug cards, all of those things into the wallet that makes it so much easier for people. A real quick win, because as soon as one person saw how easy it was and what they've got in that one place, we had a queue of people. So it's those little things that give have given me the quick wins to be able to then have those more in-depth conversations and sell it from we have a Newport City Homes app where you can make your payments and pay your rents. You can raise repairs and so on. All of the things in housing associations, which are the predominant reasons that people will contact you. So trying to make it easier, trying to make it safe for people to go and to say, yeah, I'm not really sure about this, or can you go through this with me? Very similar to Scott, we've put ourselves out and about in the community. We've had more success with community centres because we own some of those in our schemes more than libraries. But we are looking to branch out a little bit further afield in different bits and pieces. We've run fun days and things like that, all with the aim of get people in, get them talking, get them asking us questions rather than us going and trying to lead the question. Does that make sense?
Absolutely does, yeah. And I think, your first point on that in particular, just kind of going back to what we were saying before, it does all kind of hinge on that trust piece, doesn't it? So sounds like there's various techniques there to sort of at least build that initial bridge of trust, and then sort of work on that, sort of build on it from there, which sounds sounds great. So thanks for that, Christian. Go on.
Yeah, sorry. I was also going to say to your point, Christian, there as well. I think it's about being prepared to meet people at their point of need, rather than come and learn some digital skills. Well, I mean, what does that even mean? Do you know what I mean? It makes much more sense to say, do you want to understand how to use our app? Or, come and learn how to save money by getting better deals online. Or, it's otherwise we're talking about something that's almost theoretical. And if you don't know what you don't know, how do you know? You can't make that choice. So I think I think the trust bit is super important, but I think there's the relationship of trust with engagement and messaging and how, again, to Christian's a point he made there about people's self-perception of not knowing as a deficit. We all don't know loads of things. We're all in deficit, but we can't afford to engage people with new things if they feel like there's something a little bit embarrassing about it. One of the challenges about the digital world is it's always changing, but we can reframe that as one of the exciting things about, there's always something to learn. And I think having people on the ground in these roles, they're picking up on things that are demand-led, and they can interpret those things. So if Scott's doing his Monday and someone mentions they want to, what's AI or whatever that thing might be, he's got it in his mind to think about, well, actually, I could do that on another Monday. So if you've got that presence on the ground, you've also got your ears open to what the new concerns are, what the new needs might be. I think those things, I think it's not just trust is very important, and the trusted people and known people and places are super important. But I think that's part of the jigsaw. I think being really sensitive to engagement and how you engage people and what the messaging is and what the benefit's going to be, because you're asking people to spend time with you. Let alone get over being worried about not knowing stuff and everything. So you've got to understand really clearly there's a benefit for me turning up on Monday at 3:00 because I will be able to do X afterwards. So I would encourage people to think quite carefully about that. It's not rocket science, actually, and it's a really fun part of the picture, I think, thinking about how to tempt people in and what are the things that people are going to respond to.
Yeah, no, definitely. And
it's like stepping back, isn't it? And you know what you want to achieve and how are you going to get there. But sometimes you think, well, it's not aimed at me.
Yeah.
So you need to take a couple of steps back and how are you going to personalize it for a group of people who you don't really know. And the only way you're going to do that is by getting to know people.
Yes. And abandon your assumptions, and there's something you said when you were doing your introduction, I think, as well, is it's hard for people like us who are sitting on the webinar before lunch to think that, we can't use a parking app. Do you know what I mean? So we've got to actually take that hat off and see it through the eyes of the people we're trying to reach. And that requires, a certain amount of discipline, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because it is really easy, isn't it, when you talk about these things, to make those assumptions, even attributing those sort of assumptions to specific groups of people, which how we found in the past isn't necessarily always the case at all, to be honest. But on that topic, Emma, of how you mentioned sort of how these things are sort of evolving and your approach has to, I suppose, change with it.
Yeah.
With that evolution of digital, and you mentioned the term AI, which I think is something we're all hearing about every single day at the moment, of how it's changing and what people are using it for. How do you guys at DU, is it something you have to really stay on top of in terms of the material you put forward in this training because of things move on so quickly? How do you go about addressing that?
Well, yeah, I mean, we have to stay on top of everything, including, AI is a big one. I think this, again, is why a train-the-trainer model works really well, because what you do at that point is, or our approach to it would be, because we're resourcing the champions, essentially, is we create guidelines and content for the champions to get their heads around the topic so they can pass that information down the chain. And when they're asked about it, they know the answers to the questions. So again, it's a much more effective and efficient way of trying to get that information out than piggybacking the intermediary. You see what I mean? That's what I really like about those models as well. When the new thing comes, right, you respond rapidly to create some guidance around it. You pass that guidance out to the front line. They assimilate it. They pass it down. That model allows you to. It's exponentially scalable, which makes it also quite effective, I think. And I think things like AI, again, it's like we're helped and we're hindered by the general chatter and the scaremongering as well. And I'm not saying there aren't some really quite concerning things about privacy governance around AI in a political context. I'm not ducking that at all. But I think the thing that happens for people like us working in this field is we're then countering perceptions of something which have got beyond us slightly, even before we got to the person in front of us. And I think that can put the trainer or the champion in quite a difficult situation. It used to be much more to do with, well, it still is actually, to be honest, scams and falling prey to scammers. Concerns around privacy, data, they've always been there, and we are right to pay attention to them. But scaremongering doesn't help. And the best way to get on top of that, or to try and get on top of that, is education. You educate your way out of these things as best as you can. That's how we deal with it.
Yeah, when you moved on to that sort of scam point, then that was kind of where my mind went as well, as you were sort of talking through that. And I think just that there were some of those stats from the beginning around that more than half of us don't have the full set of essential digital skills for work, but also 60 million people don't have the full set of skills to stay safe online. And I think that kind of feeds into it, but also that probably the definitions of those, what is deemed an essential digital skill for work and what is deemed safe sort of digital usage is probably evolving itself all the time because of these things, isn't it? I suppose as well.
I'd also say, when you talked about take up and you've got your groups of natives, early adopters, you will find that the natives have shocking levels of awareness around security and staying safe. So these figures are also slightly misleading. They might be really good at picking up your app and running with it, but they probably don't know a lot of basic stuff about how to manage their own security and personal footprint online. So some of these groupings and some of these things, they hide the fact that they're not quite as straightforward as they appear. And I think young people in general have always been assumed to be digital natives. Well, they're very good at doing loads of things, but they're kind of quite bad at doing a lot of other things. And so again, it's not helpful to just make the assumption that because you're under 16, you're going to be fine with this digital. It's not actually true.
You still don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, correct.
It doesn't matter what age you are.
Yeah.
I think there will always be that element of concern around data as well, wasn't there? And it is all sort of linked to that scaremongering side of things. And you're right, there is issues associated with it, and people do need to be aware of it. But particularly when you think about making payments online and things like inputting banking information is usually one that we tend to find is one which, if it's passing off to another sort of payment provider or whatever, that will deliver some levels of uncertainty to people, and that's based upon horror stories of the past and those sorts of things, isn't it? I suppose, which, and rightly so in some scenarios, I guess. But on to the next, and we have had a few questions through as well, so we will address those in a second. But there's just a couple of points I thought it'd be worthwhile discussing first, and kind of linking back to an article, Emma, that you published fairly recently on LinkedIn, which is a really interesting take on where you discussed the role of ESG, CSR, and social value, and sort of how they're interlinked in a way with a thread of digital inclusion. So yeah, I wondered if you wouldn't mind sort of building on that a little bit, if that's okay for the audience today as well, in terms of how people on the call might look to integrate these frameworks into their strategies.
Yes, I think it's interesting in the context of housing, because I don't. I think it's. I wrote that article predominantly for a sort of, I suppose, a business corporate audience, because what I was trying to show was that if big business behaved in a digitally inclusive way through things like its ESG and CSR practice and policy, and if when making social value commitments, they actually specifically align them to digital inclusion commitments, we could again move the needle quite a bit in this. I think housing is in a slightly different position in that I think you have a business as usual requirement to get on board with digital inclusion because you can't afford not to. So I don't think housing can leave digital inclusion to a CSR strategy. I think what you can do with those things is get your own workforce more aligned to a digital inclusion mindset. And I think those levers are useful. So how do you not just think about digital inclusion in the context of your tenants and service users? How do you get your board behind it and your senior leadership teams? How do you, as businesses, make commitments to those things that aren't just about service delivery? And I think there are opportunities to compound the commitment to digital inclusion through those sorts of frameworks, essentially. I think, but my main frustration is, it is a frustration. My main frustration is that big business could pay so much better attention to this effortlessly with a bit of joined up thinking. I think housing has to walk the walk because you're trying to deliver huge amounts of service to huge amounts of people effectively and efficiently, and digital is just part of that delivery method. But I think there's a sort of, I think all organizations can make an emotional commitment to digital inclusion. And that means everyone in the organization having their eyes open about it and understanding things like those big numbers, because a lot of people sitting on boards have no idea that 16.8 million people can't use digital. That's the changing piece. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. No, I agree, and I do take your point around sort of how that's positioned for big business versus maybe the public sector that we're talking about today. But I think I almost feel a bit like the housing sector. Yes, it's always been there for its purpose, which is helping people get into affordable homes effectively and look after them with various sort of services that sort of go along with that. I feel like it's got to the stage now where that the housing associations themselves and the sort of the teams within there are having to do so much and probably more with less. It feels like it's got to the point now that capacity is so stretched and they're being pulled in every direction with different sort of regulatory changes and things off the back of sometimes quite catastrophic events, that digital has to be an approach that they need to take to free up this capacity to sort of deal with these things. But yeah, getting the potential return on those digital investments can only really happen if digital inclusion is addressed at the same time, because which has to feed into those overarching strategies, because otherwise it's a case of just sort of continuing on. Specifically when you think about the fact that the housing sector is also now measured on consumer as well as sort of governance and viability financially and things as well, which is an interesting change, I suppose.
It's also a massive potential waste of money. It's like saying, oh, look, we'll just buy everyone a new car, but we won't give them any fuel. I mean, you just wouldn't do that, would you?
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean? So it's like, why would you do it with anything else? Sometimes it's actually just like, people, as Christian says, can we step back from this a bit and just go, does this make sense?
I think one way to address that, certainly one of the elements of the housing sector we really like at Prodo's side is the collaboration between associations, but also between different sort of parties as well. And I think they're key, aren't they, to sort of working through this. So I wondered, guys, Scott and Christian, if you could sort of elaborate maybe on any sort of collaboration and partnerships that you've found useful as part of your digital inclusion efforts, because like you mentioned before, Scott, there is a few strands to this. Part of it is access to devices and data and connection. Part of it is skills and training, and part of it is having the platforms like Christian's app at Newport to sort of help with it. How have you found collaboration across the sector, but also with sort of partners help on this side of things?
Personally, yeah, it's about finding them partners. Things cost money. So how do you find the money? You can either do funding, or you can speak to the developers who build these giant houses and have community benefit clauses and say, I have an idea. Would you like to fund it? Prime example, today, hot off the press, an email back from FireRight. So I spoke to them in one of our independent living schemes last week, and I said, oh, look, I've got a good idea. Can you help? So today, they said, yeah, we want to help you. So these developments, their focus is building houses. They don't know digital exclusion. They don't know what the community needs or what your tenants needs. So pushing them ideas to them is going to be a win-win. So another example was the tablet borrow schemes we set up in one of the local authorities. Cost about 20 grand originally to set it up. Now, no one's got that at the back of their settee and just hanging about waiting to be used. So we spoke to all the contractors in the area and said, do you want to purchase a tablet? As a result of you purchasing the tablet, we'll publicize you on any promotion. We'll also, on the screensaver, we'll lock the screensaver so no one can change it. And when it'll say on there, this device was generously donated by X company. Now, they are used to going to some fun day, having a big check and, cutting ribbon or doing whatever. And that's it. So the return on investment for that contractor who helped in that scenario for the tablet borrow scheme is the length of the tablet borrow scheme. As long as that device is working, they will be promoting their donation as a result. When we talk about in these events, that we bring up as a result of the contractors, I mentioned about FireRight just now. They've said, I don't know how much it's going to cost, but we want to test this solution you proposed with our money as a result of the community benefits. And it's about, again, going to them and pitching these ideas because their focus is building houses or their focus is doing X. They don't have, community benefits people, or a lot of them don't have community benefits people to map this need in this area of work.
Yeah, I think part of this as well, from my perspective, is working in the role that I do at a software vendor that sells solutions into the housing sector. The Procurement Act changes will feed into this, because what vendors are having to do now, and this is suppliers of all sorts, is have to place more emphasis on the social value that's offered as part of contract delivery. And that could be some of the things that you've sort of alluded to there in terms of donating certain things. It could be skills training. That's something that we tend to offer when we bid for things ourselves. But yeah, and that kind of feeds into one of the questions that we've had in the Q&A. Actually, I'm not sure if this maybe has answered part of your question, Alicia from Monmouthshire Housing. You mentioned that at Monmouthshire they've loaned equipment and donated refurb laptops. There's time spent on building confidence, building trust, and using the trainer-based approach, similar to what we were discussing before. But in terms of making that sustainable with the cost of living crisis, they're finding that some residents are they can't afford the equipment themselves, and they'd like to keep it effectively. So that kind of feeds into what you say. And then, Scott, I don't know if that's something that you guys have experienced or managed to get round in terms of loading equipment that people maybe want to keep and those sorts of things that you could help Monmouthshire with.
Yeah, so we do device borrow schemes, and then we follow that on with a gifting scheme. So we've set up in Newydd Housing, whereby old staff computers are wiped, restored, and put out to people that's been identified. Again, the process of setting that up is a 2-hour form, really, with the GDPR person, the IT manager, obviously, and computer recyclers or some sort of computer repurpose company doing that. Now, there'll be a charge to wipe and restore the device, probably £30, £50, something like that. Where does that money come from? Again, you can speak to the contractors and say, this tenant has been identified, digitally excluded, their family, XYZ, this is the scenario. Would you like to contribute £30 to wipe and restore the device and give them an opportunity to get access to a device, and then link in with myself or other community partners to develop the skills? That would be zero budget for Newydd. The contractor would pay £30, £50. It'd be a big win for them. They do a case study and things like that. And that's how we managed to go around it.
Great stuff. Thank you for that. Hopefully that answers the question. And anything further from your point of view, Christian, on that side of things, access or collaboration at all?
Yeah, from us, it's more along the lines of collaboration. There are different third parties, there's charities out there that we've touched base with, and they've provided equipment on a loaning basis. Yeah. So the cost is absorbed in from their side of it. But I do like Scott's viewpoint on that, because it's not just looking after your tenants, your community. It's also recycling equipment that just nobody goes to landfill or dump or whatnot. It's making making the laptops, the computers, that just because they're not brand new, they're still useful to somebody. So I do like that approach.
Interestingly, in this Digital Inclusion Action Plan, one of the things that the government is going to test this year is an idea of all government departments being part of a mass recycling scheme. And that's quite interesting, because there are, I think there's like upwards of 100 hardware recyclers, as it were, across the country. There are a lot of them, but there's no real one coherent system for recycling and refurbing devices and getting it back out. There are things like the data bank and the device bank, rather. But there's more demand than there is supply, and the supply is fragmented. So I think it's very interesting that the government has decided, well, actually, there's a lot of kit in our own ministerial departments that's going to let's try and model a government-led way of responding to that as well. So I mean, that's not going to help any of you tomorrow, but it might have shifted the dial on the supply and demand side of equipment within a year, you know. So things like that are also quite hopeful about this action plan, I think, because they are acknowledging, yeah, actually, this is a problem, and it's a problem at scale that we could solve with slightly different models.
Again, it's just stepping back and trying to look at things a little bit differently from what we've always done, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is what that says to me.
Yeah.
Just to jump in there, I think what I like about that is government are leading by example.
Yeah.
What I don't like is when they say you should do this, this, and then they go, "Oh, do you do it?" No, we don't do it, but you should do it.
Yeah.
So I think for them to say, we are going to test it ourselves, I see that as a big step.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed, Scott. Yeah.
I haven't managed to read that myself, and I know it's quite fresh in terms of being issued yesterday, that sort of initiative and action plan, Emma. But we did have another question on that, and I'm not sure if you've managed to consume it enough yourself either just yet. But is Helen Hapgood asks if that legislation is coming from UK wide, and how that potentially impacts or changes for the Welsh government specifically, if you're aware of that at all at this stage.
So okay, I've done speed reading. Okay, so don't like tell me off if I got it wrong. But my speed read was that it's Whitehall saying they have got to work more coherently with Welsh and Scottish governments on this, and also trying to revitalise some of the activity that happened in Northern Ireland as well. So the wording in it at the moment is. It's not like anything is changing for any of the other nations. It's more that Whitehall is saying it needs to pay better attention to lessons learned and try and align. So again, I would say indicatively that's good because there's been some brilliant work in Wales and in Scotland. So I would be encouraged. But as ever, right? There's the detail of the how and the what. Don't go reading that action plan for that. That's coming. But they're setting a stall out in a direction of travel and a direction of thinking that I feel quite confident about. And I was kind of worried, believe me. So if I feel that, ask me again next week when I've read it a couple of times. I might be going, oh my goodness, But yeah, that would be my initial takeout.
It does feel, doesn't it? It does feel encouraging at this stage that it's sort of been taken this serious from a government level, which I think probably the last few years, you alluded to 14 years earlier in the introduction, has probably been quite a gap into the previous. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question, Helen, as well, in terms of what we know about that so far.
Yeah.
We're probably coming towards the end now, guys, to be honest, which is absolutely flown by because there's so much to cover and we could probably talk about this for a few weeks at a time, to be fair. But as a closing thought, I suppose, before we move into sort of talking about what's coming next with the next session, and I know that everyone on the call here is probably at different stages of the journey on this, but the fact that you've taken the time to register and sort of attend today tells me that you're probably interested in hearing a little bit more and maybe some advice from who we've got with us today. So I wondered if each of you guys, in terms of panelists or guest speakers, whatever you want to call it, if you got a closing piece of advice in terms of where people should maybe look next. And I know that's very dependent upon where they are on their journey, but what would be your golden bit of advice for everyone today?
I'm happy to go first. Yeah, for me, it's take action. It's do something. You can't just sit there and complain about the problem. Go out, meet your tenants, meet your community, identify the needs and work collaboratively to tackle that. Because only together you can achieve more.
Yeah, absolutely, completely agree. Yeah, and it was one of those, and we discussed it, didn't we, the other day when we spoke, that I think you guys have managed to find yourselves in particular that collaborative approach and partnerships that have assisted so much. I think your view almost was that there's really no excuse not to take action on this because the support is there. It's just a case of finding it, accessing it yourselves, and prioritizing how it's used, I suppose, in a few ways, which is quite a refreshing outlook, I think. Just sort of get cracking with it.
Yeah, just to respond to that. So yeah, I've been working in digital inclusion 10 years. I'm happy to share all my work, all my learnings, all the documents, the good, the bad. You just got to let us know. And I've touched upon or tested some sort of everything. So again, that should be your baseline or stepping stone to progress that project. So again, it goes back to you. There's no excuse now. You just got to do it.
That's the collaboration across the space that we like so much, I think. What about yourself, Christian? In terms of final thoughts?
Yeah, for me, it's being relatively new to the DI journey. It's about the research, see what's available, see who's asking the same questions that you're asking with with the networking and so on. Understand as much as you can from asking the questions, not just of your community or your customers, but also your teams as well. Because your teams will either be in a similar situation for the demographic that you're trying to reach, or they will have friends or family members and so on. And you can sometimes just get those little nuggets from that as well. Just being open, listening, understanding, the usual kind of buzzwords that you would chuck about in these circumstances. But from my point of view, they're buzzwords for a good reason.
Brilliant. Excellent. And yourself, Emma?
I would echo what Christian and Scott said as well. And I would say saying slightly the same thing, case studies and other examples. There's been a lot of great work in housing on digital inclusion. These gentlemen have some of that information. There's loads of information about the work we've done with housing on our website. We've got a section about housing specifically. So learn from other people because, and don't reinvent wheels slightly. That's also about learning from other people. As Scott says, I've tried and tested most of all the things I could have done. So learn from that. Let's pass the baton on. I think I would also say think internally as much as you think externally. So I think supporting your customers, your tenants, your service users with digital inclusion is super important. But don't forget to raise the digital inclusion IQ of your whole organization, because your whole organization has to respond to this. It's not just the job of the tenant-facing people on the ground. It's the job of the board. It's the job of senior management. That has to be, I would like that to be part of a mandatory compliance set of learning. And to the regulatory point, I think, again, that would be something that could really change the dial on this agenda. And then the third thing I would say was consider using the word investment when you go to say funding, and change your own lens on it, because you can't afford not to. And I guess that echoes what Scott's saying about just take action. Is like you kind of don't have a choice around this. So think not about what the outlay is in terms of I've got to fund something else. If I don't invest in this, what are the implications for not doing that? Because they will be worse than the funding implications of not funding it, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great stuff. Well, appreciate it. Thanks for those final thoughts, everyone, and your time today as well. I hope you all found that useful. I thought it was a really good session, and I think it's really clear, isn't it, that we all kind of have our own part to play in helping bridge the digital divide in a few ways, and everyone, I think, in the housing space is really open to collaborate on this particular topic, and as well as many others as well. What we'd be more than happy to do, because we do help housing associations work on digital strategies, but also work through digital inclusion as well. So if anyone would, have the preference today of not sort of asking the question publicly or anything in front of everybody else, and just wanted a consultation call with us, that's absolutely fine, and we can offer advice, but also make the connections that you might be looking for as well. So feel free to get in touch with us, and we can arrange that. But I just wanted to thank you all for taking the time to join with us today. Emma, Scott, and Christian, specifically yourselves as well, for joining as guest panelists today. Hopefully we can do it again at some point in the future, because it is a topic which, as I say, we probably only covered half of what we planned to discuss today, and there's plenty more to to discuss. But yeah, one final point is that we will be running another session again, as usual, last Thursday of the month in March, so 27th of March at 11 o'clock. And because we're at the moment focusing quite heavily on the customer, generally, and sort of driving forwards customer satisfaction, I thought it was quite interesting that Inside Housing's repairs tracker was issued on Monday, I think, talking about the increased spend on repairs specifically, and 1 billion's been spent more in the last sort of 12 months than the previous as well. So we'll be covering the state of repairs and sort of how that feeds into customer satisfaction too. So yeah, feel free to join us for that one as well. But no, thank you very much, and thanks again to you guys for joining us from the panelist point of view. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you for the next session. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, all.
Bye.
Take care.